"So no one came?" the nurse whispered, glancing at the empty doorway. I just smiled, too tired to explain that my children hadn't visited once in 6 days. Not a call. Not even a message. But the irony? At the reading of my will, every single one of them showed up, dressed in designer clothes, faces full of expectation. That hospital bed taught me a truth I never wanted to learn. You only matter when you're gone. Or when there's money involved. And that day, lying under cold white sheets, I made a quiet decision that would change everything. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and boiled rice. A small TV flickered silently in the corner, playing some old soap opera I used to watch with my daughter. The tray of food by my side had gone cold again, untouched since morning. It wasn't that I couldn't eat. It was just, what's the point when every bite tastes like absence? I stared at the door. Any second now, I told myself. They'll walk in. Maybe Rishi, my son, with that soft guilt on his face. Or maybe Artie, my eldest, holding tulips. She knew I liked tulips. But the only ones who came were nurses with clipped voices and rushed movements. They asked how I felt, took my blood pressure, changed my bag. Then they moved on. One nurse, the kind young girl with the plate, lingered for a moment this morning. She peeked into my room and asked, "Still no visitors, Auntie?" I nodded, as if it didn't sting. She pressed her lips into a line, left a banana on my bedside table and walked out. A banana. From a stranger. When my own children were a 15-minute drive away. The silence in that hospital was different. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that reminds you you're no longer important in anyone's life. My husband, Raghu, would have never allowed this. Not when he was alive. Not when we built our lives brick by brick. Starting from a one-bedroom flat above a garage, saving every rupee, buying our home, raising 3 children with ironed uniforms and warm tiffins. But Raghu died 12 years ago. And somewhere in those 12 years I faded. First they called every weekend. Artie would ask, "Ma, did you take your medicine?" Rishi came by once a month, usually with his son Aryan, who'd give me a distracted hug and scroll his phone through the visit. Even that stopped eventually. The calls became texts. The texts became emojis. Then silence. I remember the day I was admitted. It was a Tuesday. I had collapsed in the bathroom. The maid Shanta found me. She was the one who called the ambulance. Not my children. I gave her their numbers, all 3. As I slipped in and out of consciousness in the ambulance, none of them showed up. I checked my phone on the second day. A missed call from Rishi, time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. No message. No voice note. Just a call that didn't even ring long enough to wake me. By day 3, I stopped checking the phone. By day 4, I stopped hoping. Every sound in the hallway made me stiffen. A trolley rolling past. A cough. Footsteps. I would hold my breath, thinking maybe this time. But it was always someone else's loved ones. I watched a man bring a thermos for his mother in the room next to mine. He helped her sip soup. Adjusted her pillows. Brushed her hair. She looked at him like he had just saved her from the jaws of death. And I looked away. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want the nurse to come back and ask me again if I was okay. 'Cause I wasn't. But what would be the point of saying it out loud? That evening, as the sky outside turned to a sickly orange, I found myself whispering Raghu's name. Just softly. A single breath. As if saying it would bring him back. There was no reply, of course. Just the beep of the monitor. The sigh of the air conditioner. But inside I felt a shift. A quiet, aching resolve. This wasn't just about them forgetting to visit. This was about everything. The years I gave up for them. The dreams I buried. The silences I endured. The love I offered freely, endlessly. And now? They had left me here. Like a piece of old furniture. Forgotten in a dark corner. There was a chair in the corner of my hospital room. Metal frame, plastic seat. No one ever sat in it. Every time I looked at it, I imagined one of my children sitting there, holding my hand. But it remained empty. Just like the other chair at home, the one Raghu used to sit in. That chair, too, had stayed empty all these years. Artie once suggested we donate it. "It's just gathering dust, Ma." But I couldn't. That chair held memories. It was where he read his paper, drank his morning chai, hummed old songs. Funny, isn't it? the things we hold on to, the people we let go of. On the sixth day, as the sun set behind the hospital buildings and the evening breeze carried the smell of samosas from the canteen, I sat up slowly, peeled the banana the nurse had left, and took a bite. Tears filled my eyes, not because of the taste, but because it was the first act of kindness I'd received in days. From someone who didn't even know me. That's when I knew something inside me had shifted permanently. I looked at my phone one last time. Still no calls. So I opened the Notes app. Typed a few lines. A thought. Promised to myself. You may not have come for me while I was breathing, but I will make sure you remember me when I'm gone. And with that I closed the phone, leaned back into the pillow, and stared at that empty chair until my eyes blurred. Not from sadness, but from clarity. They left me alone in that hospital, but they had no idea what I was about to do. The smell of turmeric and fresh soap always reminds me of those early mornings, when the children were small, and Raghu was still alive. Our home back then wasn't grand, just 2 rooms and a shared bathroom with peeling paint. But it was full of warmth, laughter, the clatter of stainless steel plates, the hum of the radio, the chaos of 3 kids getting ready for school while I ironed uniforms and packed lunchboxes with one hand. I didn't have much, but I gave them everything. Rishi was the quiet one, always clinging to my sari as I cooked. He had a stammer as a boy. Other children mocked him, but I held his chin once and said, "Beta, your voice is gold. Don't let them make you doubt it." Years later, when he became a successful banker, he gave a speech at his company's annual function. He sent me the video. That was the last time he ever said thank you. Artie, my eldest, was bold. The kind who never waited to be told what she could or couldn't do. She once got into a fight with a boy who teased her about her dark skin. I was called to school. Instead of scolding her, I kissed her forehead and bought her bangles on the way home. She grew up to be fierce, strong, a mother of 2 herself now. But somewhere along the line, her strength turned into something colder, sharper. She stopped hugging me, started calling only when she needed something. And Mehul, my youngest, my baby, always the dreamer. He wanted to be a musician. I remember the day he came home with a broken guitar and tears in his eyes. His tuition money was due, and I didn't have enough for both. So I pawned my bangles, the gold ones Raghu gave me on our 3rd anniversary. He never knew. I did that for all 3 of them many times, quietly, without a show, without reminders. Because that's what mothers do, right? We erase ourselves slowly so our children can write their names in bold. I remember one monsoon evening, the roof had started to leak, and the electricity was gone. We were huddled together on the bed, eating chapatis with pickle by candlelight. Artie asked, "Ma, when we grow up, will you still cook for us?" I laughed. "No, darling. You'll cook for me. And your kids too." We all laughed then. But now no one even asks if I've eaten. After Raghu died, everything changed. Not all at once. Slowly. Like a painting losing color. First, they were supportive. Artie stayed a few weeks. Rishi handled the bank work. Mehul called daily. But grief makes people selfish. They moved on. I didn't. Because I couldn't. I stayed in that house, the one Raghu and I built together. Sweeping the same floors, watering the same plants, hoping each year that maybe, just maybe, they'd come back home for more than just Diwali. They didn't. Last year, when I told Artie about my knee pain, she sent me a video link about exercises. When I asked Rishi to help with the property tax paperwork, he forwarded me his secretary's number. Mehul? He lives in another city now. Plays in a band. Sends New Year's messages sometimes. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it with clarity. They didn't become bad people. They just stopped seeing me. Stopped remembering the woman who gave up her sari dreams, her school diploma, her gold bangles, for them. That's the thing no one tells you about motherhood. It's a contract with invisible ink. You give everything. And sometimes you vanish in the process. The last photo I have of all of us together is from 5 years ago. My 70th birthday. We were at a restaurant. Rishi was checking his phone. Artie looked annoyed that the cake was chocolate and not fruit. Mehul was late. I was smiling for the camera, not for myself. That photo is now cracked in one corner. I kept meaning to replace the frame. But something about the crack feels honest. Like it tells the truth better than the picture does. The day after I returned from the hospital, I stood in front of that photo. My legs were still weak. I had to lean on Ragu's old walking stick. And I said to the empty room, "Ragu, if you were here, they wouldn't dare treat me like this." Of course there was no reply. Just the soft creak of the fan and the cold cup of tea on the table beside me, untouched again. But something inside me stirred. A memory. A strength. Ragu once told me, "If ever you feel forgotten, remind the world who you are." Not with noise but with silence that echoes. And that day, as I looked into the eyes of that faded photograph, I decided I would remind them. Not with scolding. Not with tears. But with truth. I had spent a lifetime giving them everything. But now they were about to learn what it felt like to be left empty. When I came back home from the hospital, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against your ribs and whispers, "You don't belong here anymore." There was no warm welcome. No, "How are you feeling, Ma?" Not even an acknowledgement that I'd just returned from a near-death experience. Instead, Artie barely glanced up from her phone when I walked in, leaning on my stick. "You're back?" she asked, not moving from the sofa. I nodded. My legs ached. My head was still heavy. I wanted to lie down. Rishi came out of his room. "You should take it easy," he mumbled, eyes flicking toward his wife, who raised an eyebrow. He fell silent. No one offered me water. No one brought me tea. I walked slowly to my room and closed the door behind me, heart heavier than my body. Later that evening, I heard them laughing in the living room. Plates clinking. Smells of hot samosas and fresh chutney floated in. I limped out, hopeful. Maybe they were celebrating my return in their own strange way. But before I could reach the dining area, I heard it. "Thank God she's back in her room," Artie said. "The energy feels lighter already." My heart stopped, then thudded back to life, slower, heavier. Rishi chuckled. Not loud, but not denying her either. I turned and went back to my room. My tea was cold on the table. Again. The next day, I overheard them talking about shifting things around the house. Artie's voice floated through the hallway. "If we move that shelf, I can turn her room into a craft studio. It has such nice light." Rishi. "Let's wait, she just came back." Artie. "She's not getting younger, Rishi. We can't keep waiting forever." That was the first time I realized they weren't planning to share this home with me anymore. They were planning around my absence. Preparing for a version of the house without me in it. Artie walked past me later that day and muttered, "We all need our own space, you know? That's not selfish. It's just practical." I wanted to ask her when I became a burden instead of her mother. But I swallowed the question. I was tired of swallowing. That evening I sat at the dining table. The chair I always used, the one Ragu had bought me, was already taken by Arian, their teenage son. I reached for the chair beside him. Artie saw me and raised her voice, just enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Auntie, that seat's taken. Why don't you eat later? There's not much space right now." "Auntie." "Not Ma. Not Mummy. Auntie." I looked around. No one said anything. Not Rishi. Not even Arian, who shifted uncomfortably but didn't get up. I nodded silently and turned away. I went to my room. Closed the door. Ate the cold roti and a loose sabzi they had left in a steel plate, without onions or salt. I used to make paneer korma and hot fulkas for them with my hands trembling from age. Now I was given leftovers and a locked door. That night I sat on Ragu's chair. The one they wanted to donate. I hadn't sat in it in years. Creaked under my weight, but it felt safe. Familiar. I picked up his old diary. It was in the drawer, untouched, wrapped in a soft cotton cloth. I used to read from it every week when I missed him most. Tonight the pages felt heavier. More necessary. He had written once, "Our home is not just walls. It is memory, sacrifice, and presence. If ever they forget that, remind them." I ran my fingers over those words. And I remembered every corner of this house. The tiles we chose together, the curtain fabric I stitched by hand, the money we saved to buy the sofa. This wasn't just a house. It was a lifetime. They saw it as property. I saw it as blood. The next morning I made my own tea. The milk was slightly sour. The sugar tin was empty. No one had bothered to ask if I wanted anything from the market. I sipped slowly, eyes fixed on the garden I had once nurtured. It was dying now, just like everything else. And in that silence between the taste of bitter tea and the smell of old curtains, I made a vow. They wanted to erase me gently, politely, one cold plate at a time. But I would not disappear. Not like this. Not without showing them who I had been, and who I still was. They thought I would fade quietly, but they hadn't read the part of the story I was about to write. It was supposed to be a small dinner. A neighbor's anniversary, simple food, some music, a few familiar faces. I hadn't been out in weeks, not since returning from the hospital. So when Mrs. Sharma invited me personally, I said yes. I wore my maroon silk sari, the one Raghu always said made me look regal, and fastened the gold brooch Mehul had given me on my 65th birthday. For a brief moment, looking in the mirror, I felt like myself again. Whole. Visible. The Sharmas lived just 2 houses down. As I walked slowly to their gate, my heart lifted when I saw Rishi and Arti already there. Arti wore a sharp green dress. Rishi stood beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd. I smiled and raised my hand slightly in greeting. They saw me. They turned away. Inside, guests mingled with plates of pakoras and small paper cups of raisin. The air buzzed with light music and laughter. Mrs. Sharma waved at me warmly and guided me to the buffet. That's when I saw it. One long dining table neatly set with chairs. Every seat was taken except one right in the middle. I recognized it. My name card was beside it. Mrs. Uma Narayan. I moved toward it, heart fluttering. But just as I reached to pull it out, Arti's voice, loud and sharp. Who invited you here? Everything stopped. Chatter died. A few heads turned. I froze. I looked at her. She gave a half smile, then added louder. Oh, sorry, I thought this was a family table. Didn't know anyone else would be sitting here. The pain wasn't just in her words. It was in how no one, not even Rishi, said anything. He looked down at his plate, pretending to be busy. Mrs. Sharma, bless her, tried to intervene. No, Umaji is our guest of honor. That chair is hers. Arti laughed lightly, waved a hand and said, Oh sure, of course. Just didn't expect it. Then she turned to the next guest and changed the topic as if nothing had happened. But something had. A small crack, public, intentional, had been made. And everyone saw it. I sat down in that chair, feeling like a misplaced object. The food turned to ash in my mouth. Every bite was heavy with humiliation. Once long ago I had organized dinners like this. Hosted every Diwali. Cooked for 20 people. Everyone would touch my feet and say, Umaji, you're the heart of this house. Now I was a formality. A ghost with a name card. On the way home I walked slowly, letting the air dry the tears I didn't want anyone to see. The wind was cold. My sandals pinched. When I entered the house, Arti was already on the sofa, scrolling through her phone like nothing happened. I stood there for a moment, waiting. Nothing. No apology. Not even eye contact. Later that night I couldn't sleep. I sat in Raghu's chair, hands folded in my lap, the maroon sari still clinging to my tired body. The brooch felt too heavy on my chest. I thought of that word. Who invited you? 3 words. But they struck harder than any slap. Because behind them was the truth they never said aloud. You don't belong anymore. The next morning I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Arti and Rishi were in the kitchen. She's not going to be around forever, Arti said, her voice brisk. We should start talking to that broker. Property values are rising. Rishi hesitated. It's her house. Legally, yes, Arti snapped. But she's too old to manage it. And anyway, she'll leave it to us eventually. Better to be practical. I stood frozen in the hallway, one hand against the wall to steady myself. So this was it. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were planning for it. Engagement prompt CTA number 1. What would you do if your own child let you be humiliated in front of neighbors and said nothing? Would you forgive or would you finally walk away? I returned to my room, heart pounding, head spinning. There on the table was the cold cup of tea again, left by Shanta, who always remembered. I took a sip. Bitter. Then I opened Raghu's diary again. The page he had once bookmarked had a quote written in his neat handwriting. A storm does not announce itself with thunder. It begins with silence. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to bring the storm. And the first thing I would do was make a call to someone they had forgotten existed. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting golden lines across the floor. I woke up earlier than usual, a little flutter in my chest. I didn't need a calendar to know the date. August 12th. My birthday. I sat up slowly, adjusting my shawl and smiled to myself. Maybe today would be different. Maybe they'd remember. I washed my face with the cold splash of the steel mug and changed into my best cotton sari. Sky blue, soft with age. It still fit perfectly. I pinned Ragu's brooch to the palu, a tradition I'd kept since he passed. The house was quiet. I stepped into the kitchen. Shanta, the maid, was wiping the counter. Janamdin Mubarak, Amma, she said softly, without even needing a reminder. I smiled gratefully. Tum yadha. Main bul sakti hun kia? Harsal ap gulab jamun banate the naaz din. Gulab jamun. Yes, I always made them. But not this year. I sat at the dining table waiting. 9 a.m., then 10, then 11. No one came out. No one wished me. No one even noticed the blue sari. At 12, Artie walked past with her yoga mat slung over her shoulder, earbuds in. Rishi was in a video call. Aryan barely grunted a good morning as he rushed out the door. Not a single one of them remembered. Not my son. Not my daughter-in-law. Not my grandson. At lunchtime I went to the fridge. Maybe, just maybe, there was a cake inside. Hope surged through me. But it was labeled with a sticky note. For Priya's office party. Do not touch. Priya. Artie's cousin. The cake wasn't for me. I stared at it for a long time. The icing was perfect. White with red roses. The kind I liked. I closed the fridge. Slowly. Deliberately. I didn't eat lunch that day. Didn't feel hungry. I sat in the garden, or what was left of it. The marigolds had dried up, the soil cracked. No one had watered them in weeks. I had once planted tulips there. Rishi helped dig the first hole. Mehul brought me the bulbs from Udi. Artie painted the pots. Now the pots were cracked and forgotten. Like me. Around 3 p.m., Shanta brought in a small bowl. 2 gulab jamuns. I made these, Amma. Not perfect, but... She trailed off. I looked at her. My eyes burned. She placed them gently on the table and left. I took a bite. Warm. Sweet. Soft. And still that single bite shattered me. Because it came from love, something I hadn't tasted in this house in years. I went back to my room. Closed the door. Sat on the bed and stared at the wall. No music. No cards. No voices. The silence was louder than anything I'd heard all year. And in that silence something inside me collapsed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet breaking. Like a thread snapping inside the chest. I stood up, walked to the cupboard and pulled down a box. Wrapped in blue paper. Tied with a silver ribbon. I had kept it hidden for 3 years. It was a gift to myself. A small bottle of perfume I once saw at the market, but never opened. I had saved it for a day I felt loved. Today I opened it. Sprayed it once into the air. The scent filled the room. Soft. Floral. Familiar. And it hit me. I didn't need their love to feel whole. But I did need to stop giving them the power to define my worth. That evening they finally noticed me. Or rather noticed something. I didn't come out for dinner. Artie knocked once. Ma? You want food? I said, no thank you, through the door. She didn't ask again. Rishi texted me. Not a call. A text. You okay? I didn't reply. 'Cause no, I wasn't okay. And it was time they felt that silence. Later I wrote a letter. Just a note, really. Scribbled in my diary. Today I turned 74. The house forgot. But I didn't. I remembered who I was. And what I've become. And what I will no longer allow. I placed it under Ragu's photo. Then I sat back in his chair. I looked around at the room. The cracked photo frame. The fading curtains. The cold cup of tea. And I whispered, I'm done. But just when I thought I was completely alone, a voice from the past came calling. The rain started softly that night, tapping against the windows like an old friend asking to be let in. I stood by the glass watching the streetlights blur through the drizzle. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, and the neighbor's generator hummed into life. In that quiet moment, with the scent of wet earth in the air, I whispered his name. Raghu. It slipped out like a sigh, like a confession. I needed him. His presence wasn't loud in the room. It never had been. Raghu was always the quiet strength behind every decision we made. He never shouted, never scolded, but when he spoke, people listened. I had started to forget the sound of his voice, but I still remembered the weight of his hand on mine when things got hard. And tonight they were hard. Harder than I'd ever admit aloud. I opened the drawer in his old desk, the one they wanted to sell last year. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, was his diary. Not many pages, but each one filled with thoughts written in his careful slanted script. One entry caught my eye. If one day you find yourself alone in a house full of people, remember, silence is a weapon. Use it wisely. I smiled through the ache in my chest. He had known. Even back then. The weight women carry. The way mothers disappear. That's when the idea struck. It came gently, not like a fire but like a slow light filling a room. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a fight. I wanted the truth. To speak one last time with power. And I knew exactly how, through my will. I picked up the land papers from the cupboard. The same ones I had guarded all these years. This house, this land, every corner of it was still in my name. Raghu had made sure of that. The kids had asked me many times to add their names. Ma, it's safer. Just in case. But I never did. Maybe some part of me always knew this day would come. The next morning I called the one person I trusted. Mr. Ghosh. Our old family lawyer. Retired now, mostly bedridden. But sharp as ever. He had helped Raghu and me buy this house, draft our first joint account, even file for school admissions. When he heard my voice he paused. Then said gently, "It's been too long, Uma ji." I told him everything. Not in a bitter tone. Just the truth. The hospital. The silence. The birthday. The dinner. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished he said only one thing. "Do you want to make a new will?" I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. But this time not for them. I asked him to help me draft something different. I didn't want to leave the house to any of the children. Not after how they made me feel in the home I built with my bare hands. Instead, I asked him to help transfer the house to a women's shelter. One I had visited long ago with Raghu, to donate blankets. A quiet place where abandoned women, widows and survivors found safety. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "It will be done. But are you sure? It will cause shock. Maybe even hatred." "I've already lived through silence," I replied. "Shock doesn't scare me." Over the next few days we worked in secret. I went to his house with the documents, signed each page with a hand that didn't tremble anymore. Mr. Ghosh recorded my wishes, took witness signatures, and advised me to keep a letter with the will. A final word from me. So I wrote. Not out of anger, but out of love for myself. To those who sat in silence while I faded, this house was built from my love, my labor and my sacrifices. When I needed warmth I found cold. When I needed presence I found absence. So this home will now warm others who have no one. Let them find here what I could not. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it alongside the legal papers in a wooden box Raghu had once gifted me. Then I hid the box beneath the floorboard, under the old armchair they said was too bulky for their modern decor. A chair I refused to let go of, because some things, some people deserve to remain. For the first time in months I slept peacefully that night. Not because the pain had vanished, but because I had reclaimed something I didn't even know I'd lost. My voice. They thought I was sleeping away my final days, but I was planning something they'd never forget. From the outside nothing changed. I still took my morning tea cold as always. I still sat by the window in Raghu's chair. I still smiled politely when Artie handed me half-hearted meals, or when Rishi mumbled quick greetings before rushing off to work. But inside me something had shifted. I was no longer waiting to be remembered. I was preparing to be heard. One morning I noticed Artie standing at the entryway with a tall man in a crisp shirt. I stayed behind the curtain listening. "This room gets such good light," she said. "Perfect for my studio." The man nodded, scribbling something in a notepad. Rishi emerged a few seconds later, adjusting his sleeves. "The old woman's room?" She's barely using it now. Old woman. Not Ma. Not Ama. Just a logistical inconvenience in their new interior design. That night, I pulled out the wooden box again, the one with my will, the letter, and the property documents. I checked each paper. Every signature. Every stamp. Everything airtight. Mr. Ghosh had done his part with precision. But now I needed one more thing. Evidence. Not for court. For clarity. Because one day when people asked why I did what I did, I wanted to have my answers ready. So I began writing. I filled pages in my diary. Quietly. Slowly. Each day a little more. I described my days in the hospital, 6 in total, without a single visitor. I wrote about the dinner party insult. The birthday silence. The overheard conversations. The property broker. The cake labeled for someone else. Each page was a piece of the puzzle. Each word a mirror they would one day be forced to look into. A few days later, I noticed something missing from my room. The small framed photo of Raghu and me. The one we took in Shimla during our 30th anniversary trip. We were both holding ice cream cones, laughing. Gone. I searched the shelves. The cupboard. Even behind the curtain. When I finally asked Shanta, her face dropped. Ama. Artie madam told me to pack some old things for donation. Maybe it went in that box. I stood there frozen. They had started removing me before I had even left. That was the final straw. Not the insult. Not the erasure. But the quiet theft of memory. Of love. Of us. I walked back to my room, sat on the bed, and stared at the empty space on the table where that photo had lived for 20 years. And I whispered to the air. Enough. The next morning I called Mira. My niece. Daughter of my younger sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Not out of anger, just distance. When she picked up, her voice was warm. Ma'uma, she gasped. You remembered me today? I smiled. I never forgot you, Mira. I just forgot myself for a while. We spoke for an hour. Laughed. Remembered old sweets we used to make. Talked about her daughter's school, her husband's new job, the little dog she adopted. Then she said something that sealed everything for me. You should come stay with us for a while. This house is small, but the love isn't. That evening I packed a small bag. Just clothes. My diary. A photo of Raghu. And the wooden box locked, sealed, and labeled. I didn't say anything to Rishi or Artie. They didn't ask. They didn't notice. Shanta walked me to the gate the next morning. You're going, Ama? She asked, her voice trembling. For a while, I said. But this time I'm not running away. I'm walking towards something. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Then slipped a packet of homemade laddus into my bag. No one else even said goodbye. In Mira's home I slept soundly for the first time in years. No hushed insults. No cold food. No walking on eggshells. Just laughter, noisy children, and a kitchen that smelled like love. 1 week later, I sent a registered envelope to Mr. Ghosh. Inside it, final confirmation of the property transfer, my handwritten letter, and a short note that read, when the time comes, make sure they hear me. Every word. Because while they ignored me in life, I knew exactly how to make them listen in death. It was early morning when the sharp pain returned, a twisting, breath-snatching ache in my chest that radiated down my left arm. I was staying in Mira's home then. She had just left to drop her daughter at school when it happened. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. The world tilted. The floor rushed up to meet me. The next thing I saw was a white ceiling. Monitors. For drips. A gentle beep-beep of life. I blinked. A nurse leaned over. You're at Shantiniketan Nursing Home, ma'am. You had a mild cardiac episode. But you're stable now. She smiled kindly, adjusted my blanket, and added softly, your niece's family has been here every day. I tried to speak. My voice cracked. Anyone else? She paused, glanced at the file, and shook her head. Just them. Mira came in minutes later, face pale but relieved. She held my hand and kissed my forehead. You scared us, Ma'uma, she whispered. I looked at her. This woman who had no obligation to me, who had no property to inherit, and realized something that made my eyes sting. She cared. Truly. Without condition. 2 days passed. Then 3. The door never opened for anyone else. No Rishi. No Artie. No Mehul. Not even a message. I lay in that hospital bed same as before, only now I wasn't alone in the room, but I was alone in their lives. On the fourth day, Mira brought a letter. Post came for you. I opened it slowly. Inside was a document from Mr. Ghosh, confirming the final registration of my property, now legally transferred to Shakti Niwas, the women's shelter. It was done. Signed. Irreversible. My heart beat steadily under the soft hum of the machines. Not from pain. From peace. Later that night I asked Mira for my diary. She placed it in my hands. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, I gave them life. They gave me absence. So I gave others a home. And in that I found mine. A nurse walked in with fresh tea. She smiled. Looks like your strength's coming back. I sipped. Warm. Sweet. Real. And I whispered to myself, I'm coming back too. 5 days later I was discharged. Mira insisted I come back to her house to recover more fully. I agreed. And that's when the message finally came. From Rishi. A single line. Heard you were in the hospital. Why didn't you tell us? I stared at the screen. I typed a reply. Then deleted it. Instead I sent only this. You were silent the first time. I didn't want to disturb your peace the second. And just like that. Nothing. No apology. No urgency. Just the same void they'd always left me in. Except this time I wasn't lost in it. This time I was standing on the other side of it. And watching. Do you think people who ignored your pain should be entitled to your legacy? Tell me honestly. Is a blood bond stronger than respect? A week later the lawyer called me. They found out, he said. I sat still. Rishi called me yesterday furious. They received a copy of the public property record. The house is no longer in your name. And I told them you were within your full rights. That it was done legally. Transparently. Fairly. I could almost hear Rishi's silence on the other end of that call. The stunned realization that they were not in control. That I had never truly been powerless. That evening Mira brought in the evening paper. I glanced at it casually and saw the ad. A small announcement from Shakti Niwas, thanking Mrs. Uma Narayan for her generous donation of property for the upliftment of abandoned women and widows. My name. Printed in bold. Legacy not bought, not demanded. Chosen. I folded the paper, tucked it into my diary, and stared out the window at the rain. This time I wasn't waiting for a call. I was waiting for the knock. Because I knew now they would come. Not out of love, but out of panic. And when they did, I would be ready. They didn't come to hold my hand in the hospital, but they would all arrive when they learned the will had been read. The silence before the storm is always the loudest. It arrived at Mira's home 2 days after the legal papers were made public. The first knock came mid-morning. Mira opened the door and turned to me with a strange look in her eyes. It's Rishi. I sat still at the dining table sipping my tea. This time it was warm. I made sure of that. Rishi stepped inside, not hurried, not frantic, just careful, as if he didn't know who I was anymore, or what I was capable of. He looked thinner, or maybe just smaller in spirit. Ma, he began. I looked at him and for a brief second, I searched for the little boy who used to hide behind my sari when guests came. He wasn't there. Only this man who had grown comfortable with my invisibility. He cleared his throat. We got the news. About the house. I didn't respond. He sat across from me. Why didn't you tell us? Still I said nothing. He tried to soften. Look, I know things have been distant. But this? Giving it all away? That's not fair. Fair. That word again. Like life had been fair to me. I set down my cup slowly. Did you visit me in the hospital? He looked startled. I didn't know. You didn't tell us. You knew the first time, I said quietly. You said nothing then. So I chose silence this time. He shifted in his seat. Ma, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just got busy. I was dying, I said calmly. He went quiet. I cooked for you through fevers. I nursed you through measles. I braided your hair when you were too tired to wake up for school. I remembered every allergy, every schedule, every heartbreak. And you got busy. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. Ma, it's not like that. Look, just change the will. Let's talk like a family. I smiled faintly. We stopped being a family when I became your background noise. Later that day, Artie called Mira. I didn't answer. So she messaged. So dramatic, Uma. Was this your way of punishing us? You think Charity will hug you at night? I read it once, then deleted it. No response was the response. But they weren't done. The next morning, Artie showed up herself. No pretense this time. She walked into Mira's house like it was her birthright. You gave away our inheritance, she spat. Our house. That was supposed to be for us. For Arian. Did Arian ever ask me how I was feeling? I asked, still seated. She blinked, caught off guard. Did you, Artie? On my birthday? Or during dinner when you asked me to eat later, loudly, in front of everyone? Her lips tightened. You're being emotional. No, I said softly. I was emotional before. Now I'm clear. Mira stood beside me, her arms crossed. She's staying here. You can't storm in like this. Artie scoffed. Oh please. She's old. She doesn't know what she's doing. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out a notarized copy of the will. Held it up. My mind is sharp. My choices are legal. And my soul is finally quiet. She tried one last tactic. I hope you're happy, Uma, she said, venom in her voice. Living with strangers. Giving your life's work to beggars. I stared at her long and hard. Then said slowly and clearly. Better beggars who are kind, than blood who is cruel. She stormed out. Rishi didn't return. Neither did Mehul. The silence resumed. But this time it didn't hurt. Felt earned. That night I sat by the window and watched the stars. No longer waiting for apologies. No longer seeking love in abandoned places. I sipped my tea hot, fragrant, steady. And I wrote one final entry in my diary. They came not with concern but with calculation. I gave them decades. They gave me silence. So I gave my home to those who would fill it with care. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. The will was about to be read in full. And I had one more truth waiting to rise. The days that followed were quiet. Not with loneliness but with peace. I found myself waking up earlier. Mira would make ginger tea, and we'd sit on the terrace, her daughter's laughter floating up from downstairs as she got ready for school. There was no tension. No measuring of words. No eggshells on the floor. Just stillness. And space to breathe. One morning I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair, and caught sight of the woman staring back. She looked different. Older, yes. Weaker in body. But stronger in something else. Her eyes didn't search for validation. They simply saw. Later that day I took out my old photo album. The one I hadn't touched in years. It had been tucked between sweaters in Mira's cupboard. The edges were worn. The spine cracked. I turned the pages slowly. There I was, 26, holding Rishi for the first time. My smile exhausted and elated. Artie's third birthday, balloons, mismatched decorations, her face smeared with cake. Mehul learning to ride a bicycle, his tiny hands clutching my dupatta because he was scared to fall. Every memory was a testament to who I had been. Not a burden. Not a background character. A mother. A builder of lives. A woman who gave endlessly. And yet here I was. Erased. Not in name. In presence. Replaced by convenience. That evening Mira came into my room with an envelope. It had arrived by courier, formal, thick with gold embossing. The will was being officially read. A date. A location. A lawyer's chamber in central Mumbai. She looked at me cautiously. You don't have to go, Uma. I smiled. But I do. I asked her to pull out a sari for me. Not one of mourning or subtlety. But crimson silk. The one with zari borders. The one Raghu had gifted me after our 25th anniversary, when he looked at me and said, I'll never be richer than the day you became mine. I hadn't worn it in a decade. Now felt like the right time. The night before the reading I couldn't sleep. I walked to the balcony and let the breeze hit my face. Somewhere inside a tiny voice whispered, Was I ever their mother? I didn't mean biologically. I meant emotionally, spiritually, soulfully. Had they ever truly seen me? Not as the woman who cooked or cleaned or gave up dreams, but as someone who hurt, longed, loved? I sat down and opened the diary one last time. This time not to reflect, but to write a new entry. They took my presence for granted. They took my absence for profit. But tomorrow they will face the full weight of their choices and mine. I slipped the diary into my bag, along with one more thing. The final letter. Not the legal one, but a handwritten message I had penned 3 weeks ago, sealed in an envelope and kept for this moment. A truth they would not expect. It was time, not for vengeance, but for clarity. The next morning I rose early. Mira helped pleat the sari. She pinned Ragu's brooch near my shoulder. And before I left, I looked in the mirror one last time. The same mirror that once reflected a tired, erased woman. Today it reflected someone whole. Someone awake. I walked into that lawyer's office not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman with nothing left to prove, and one last truth to share. The air inside the lawyer's office was thick with tension. The walls were lined with books and certificates, but the energy felt like a battlefield. Polished, professional, and deadly quiet. I stepped in slowly, cane in hand, sari pleated perfectly, brooch gleaming against my shoulder. Mira walked beside me, calm and steady. At the far end of the long table, they were already seated. Rishi, Artie, Mehul. All 3 of them. Their faces froze when they saw me. I didn't smile. I simply nodded. The lawyer, Mr. Ghosh's associate, a young man named Nikhil, stood to welcome me. He offered me the seat at the head of the table. Rishi opened his mouth, likely to object, but the lawyer beat him to it. Mrs. Uma Narayan is the principal party in this matter. This is her will. Artie scoffed but said nothing. The session began. Nikhil spoke with precision, his tone professional. As per the legal will signed and registered by Mrs. Uma Narayan, the distribution of her assets shall now be read in full presence of family and designated witness. He went through the formalities. Then the room fell still. And the words began. The primary residence, located at 32 Kasturba Nagar, Mumbai, formerly the family home, is hereby transferred in full to the care and ownership of Shakti Niwas, a non-profit shelter for women and widows. Artie's head whipped toward me. You gave it away? I didn't flinch. Mehul muttered. This has to be a mistake. Nikhil continued. The house shall no longer be part of the family estate and has been removed from any claims by blood relatives, effective immediately. I saw Rishi's knuckles turn white. Artie leaned forward. You can't be serious. That house was our legacy. You had no right. No, I said quietly, locking eyes with her. It was my legacy. You just assumed it would be yours. She opened her mouth to snap back, but the lawyer raised a hand. There's more. He picked up a sealed envelope. This is a personal letter, to be read aloud at the testator's request. My letter. My voice, the one they had ignored in life, was now about to fill the room. He opened it and began. To my children. If you are hearing this, I am gone. But before I left, I wanted you to know the truth. You see, death is not always a surprise. Sometimes it comes gently like sleep after years of being tired. I was tired. Not just in body but in heart. Tired of waiting for a call that never came. Tired of sitting at empty birthday tables. Tired of becoming a ghost in the house I built with my hands. You didn't kill me. You erased me. Slowly. Until I was only needed for rituals and signatures. But I remembered everything. And that memory gave me clarity. I watched their faces as the words sank in. Mehul looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Artie stared coldly, arms crossed. Rishi looked broken. Good. They needed to feel the weight of what they'd never carried. The letter continued. So I chose to leave my home to women who know what it means to be forgotten. To women who will cherish its walls, not just repaint them. As for you 3, I leave you the gift of reflection. You were once my entire world. But in the end, I had to become my own. Silence followed. Thick. Crushing. Until Mehul finally whispered. Ma, why didn't you say anything? I turned to him. I did, I said gently. Every day. Through every action. Every silence. Every forgotten cup of tea. But you all chose not to hear. The lawyer closed the file. That concludes the legal reading. A copy of the documents will be provided to each of you. I stood slowly, tucked the letter into my bag, and said, You didn't come when I needed you alive. But I knew you'd all show up when money was on the table. Then I turned and walked out. Not limping. Not rushing. Just steady. Unshaken. Outside, Mira waited with the car. "You okay?" she asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, then looked up at the sky. The sun had come out strong and bold, and for the first time in years I felt free. But the world wasn't done watching, and what happened next revealed who truly stood by me, and who only stood to gain. 2 days after the will was read, I received a visitor. Not one of them. Not Rishi. Not Artie. Not Mehul. It was Mrs. D'Souza, our old neighbor from Kasturba Nagar. She came with a plastic bag of oranges and a face full of something between pity and admiration. "I just wanted to say," she said, squeezing my hand, "what you did, it was brave. They didn't deserve that house. You did the right thing." I thanked her, but I could see it in her eyes. The curiosity, the quiet thrill of watching a private rebellion play out in public. The whispers had started, and I had nothing left to hide. Later that evening, Mira showed me something on her phone. A post. From someone in our old colony's WhatsApp group. Shocking news. Mrs. Umanarayan's house given to charity. Children left with nothing. Respect to her. Dozens of replies followed. Some said I'd lost my mind. Some said I'd finally found it. And a few thanked me. For standing up. For not giving in. But the most satisfying moment came the next morning. A neighbor from our old colony, Vinod uncle, had dropped off something at the lawyer's office. Mr. Ghosh sent it to me. It was a voice recording. A doorbell camera. Footage from the night of the anniversary dinner. Artie's voice, loud and mocking, caught perfectly in audio. "Who invited you here? Auntie, that seat's taken." Followed by her laugh. Followed by silence. And Rishi's voice, somewhere faint in the background, saying nothing at all. I listened to it once. Then again. And when I looked up, Mira was staring at me. "They were never ashamed," she said. "Because they never thought anyone would hear." That afternoon I visited the shelter Shakti Niwas. The walls were freshly painted. The garden had new plants. The women there smiled when I walked in. A small girl ran up to me holding a broken doll. Her mother followed, nervous, apologetic. But I just knelt and took the doll from her hand. "What's her name?" I asked. She grinned. "Ronnie." I smiled back. "Then let's find Ronnie a place to sit." We placed the doll on a small bench under the neem tree. The same tree I once planted outside my own home. I touched the bark. Felt familiar. Like peace. Inside, the director of the shelter walked me through the plans, how the rooms would be renovated, how many women could be housed, the small vocational training center they were planning in the garage. All in my name. But not for my pride. For my purpose. As I was leaving, I turned to her and said, "One day they may come here. Just to see what I left behind." She nodded gently. "We'll show them." Engagement prompt CTA number 3. Tell me, what matters more in the end? Blood ties or the people who show up when it counts? Would you leave behind wealth? Or a legacy of truth? That night I received a call. Unknown number. I answered. Mehul's voice. Quiet. Uneven. "Ma, I saw the clip. I heard what she said to you." I didn't know. I let the silence hang. He added, "I should have done more. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes and said softly, "You were silent when it mattered. That silence cost more than money ever could." He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Some truths sit heavier than any inheritance. I ended the call. Then made one last note in my diary. They will remember me now. Not because of what I gave, but because of what I took back. And the next morning, as the rain returned and steam rose from my tea, I realized the story was complete. The rain began just as the tea kettle whistled. Not a storm, just a soft drizzle, the kind that makes the world slow down. The sky turned the color of old slate. I reached for my shawl, wrapped it around my shoulders, and poured the tea into my favorite mug. It was the same cup I used to drink from in Kasturba Nagar, pale blue with a chipped rim and a fading floral design. Raghu had bought it at a roadside stall during one of our Sunday walks. A simple thing, but it had outlived every storm. I settled into the old wooden chair near the window, the one Mira insisted on moving here for me. It creaked under my weight, but in a way that felt familiar, like an old friend sighing with relief. Across the street, children splashed barefoot in the rain. Inside, the house was quiet, warm, lived in, alive. That morning, the headline in the local paper read, "Former schoolteacher donates home to shelter. 27 women to receive safe housing." Below it, a photo of me. Sari neatly pinned, brooch gleaming, a soft smile on my lips. But I wasn't thinking of headlines. I was thinking of names. Marjorie. That was what one of the young women at the shelter had named her newborn daughter. After me. Not Uma but Marjorie. She said it sounded like strength and softness rolled into one. "I want her to grow up strong like you, Amma," she had said. I smiled, even laughed a little. Because Marjorie was the name Raghu used to joke about when I wore my formal teacher glasses. "You look like a British librarian," he'd say. "Stern but beautiful. Very Marjorie." Now somewhere in that home a child bore the name in joy. The shelter was thriving. The director sent me photos weekly. New curtains, fresh blankets, a garden blooming again. They'd painted the front door bright yellow. Repaired the leaky roof. Built a bookshelf in the living room. They had even framed one of my old quotes on the wall. "A home is not a place you inherit. It's a space you honor." The house was no longer mine. And yet more mine than it had ever been. I opened my diary, the final page. My handwriting was shakier now, but the words were clear. Today I drank my tea while it was still hot. I sat in a chair that welcomed me. I looked at a window that didn't reflect loneliness. This is peace. This is enough. Mira came in quietly, placing a small plate of warm toast on the table. "Want to go to the shelter this weekend?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. I'd like that." She smiled. "The girls are planning a surprise." I chuckled. "With them, nothing is ever a surprise. It's all heart." She kissed the top of my head gently. "You changed their lives, you know." I looked out the window again. The sky had brightened, the rain turning to mist. "I changed mine first," I said softly. "And that, more than money, more than legacy, more than retribution, was my greatest triumph. Not that I was remembered, but that I remembered myself." The next morning, I wore the maroon sari again. The one from the neighbor's party. The one I had once worn with shame after being told, "Who invited you?" This time I wore it with pride. No one had to invite me anymore. I belonged wherever I chose to stand. At Shakti Niwas, the gate had been repainted. A fresh brass plate gleamed at the entrance. Marjorie House, a home of second chances. I stopped, stared at the name. Tears welled up unbidden. Not from sorrow. From arrival. From becoming. The women gathered around me. Clapping, laughing, some crying. Artie, the girl with the broken doll, handed me a new one. She had stitched it herself. "Ma, look. She has glasses like you." Everyone laughed. Even I did. I hugged her tight. The final motif closed. The chair. The tea. The photo. The diary. All full. All warm. All mine. That evening back home I sat with my tea again. Hot. Fragrant. Undisturbed. And as the steam rose I whispered into the silence, not as a widow, not as a mother abandoned, not as a woman betrayed, but as someone who had built something no one could take away. Dignity. They didn't visit me when I lived, but in the house I left behind my love lives on.